One and only Dr. Alexandra Smith here at Nirvana Health. Her primary focus is on female health, hormonal imbalances and changes, and she also does a lot of work with the digestive tract and much more. So tonight's webinar will be talking about preconception to postpartum. So this will be a holistic guide on all kinds of strategies. You'll learn a lot.
So yeah, tonight we're talking about preconception to postpartum and some practical evidence-based strategies to help you feel informed, confident, and supported through this process. This is a big topic to cover, so I do welcome questions as we move through. If you guys just pop the questions in the chat, I'll leave an extra 15 minutes at the end of the webinar, so I'll chat for about 45, and then we'll do 15 minutes of questions. And then, yeah, we'll kind of walk through this. I've already posted a link in the chat for you guys. I'll show you in the presentation when that's relevant, but something that's just a good guide for nutrition through this time period. Cool. Okay, so this is me. I'm Dr. Alexandra Smith, and I work at Nirvana Naturopathic Medicine. My primary practice focus is women's health and hormones. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to first talk about preconception care, the diet, lifestyle, testing, and supplement considerations to optimize fertility. Then we'll talk a little bit about pregnancy by trimester and how you adapt nutrition as your body is moving through that. A little bit of talk on labor prep and some of the key things we might start 36 weeks into pregnancy, and then some recommendations for postpartum and breastfeeding. So to start, in kind of our preconception phase, this is when I talk to women about the Pro-Fertility Plate or the Pro-Fertility Diet. With these recommendations, these things all help to increase the likelihood of natural conception. And the more we can incorporate a diet like this, the more beneficial the outcome, and we do the best we can with something like this. I try to have women focus on 3 colors of vegetables at lunch and dinner, okay? And the reason for that is that it increases the amount of antioxidants and nutrients to support overall hormone health and also to support egg quality so that when that egg is getting ready to ovulate, it has the best chance of conception. Okay, this can be any 3 colors you want. So you can mix this up day to day, week to week. I'll usually recommend that there's some form of leafy green on that plate if you can. And that can be anything from kale, arugula, mixed green, spinach, you pick. And then 2 other colors. So if you did spinach, beets, and carrots, that's awesome. Okay, and about half your plate should be vegetables, a quarter protein, and then another kind of quarter, a healthy fat about the size of your thumb, and good complex carbohydrates. So when we think about complex carbohydrates, this is things like brown rice, potatoes or sweet potatoes are great options as well. You could also think about things like quinoa and that kind of stuff. Okay, we want to try to get antioxidant berries in the diet every day. I generally recommend this in the morning because it's a really easy thing to add to yogurt with oats or oatmeal or add in a smoothie. This can be strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, dark cherries, you pick. A variety of these, again, help to increase the antioxidant status and nutrients that are really important for overall egg quality, as well as helping to support your hormones. Protein, we want to try to get 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So this is a calculation that you need to do personally to figure out what that protein intake is for you. But this helps to support healthy hormone production. When we're deficient in protein, we don't make our hormones as well, and that can reduce fertility outcomes. And so this is something we want to focus on. For most women, this is going to hit in the 75 to 110 grams on average. Okay, but do the calculation for your specific body weight. And then that way you know what kind of protein you're looking for. It's not something you necessarily have to track forever, but in the first bit of learning how much protein you should be eating, it can be really helpful to add in like a Fitness Pal or Chronometer tracking app to figure that out. You could also just go off the palm of your hand, okay? The palm of your hand is about 20 grams of protein. So if you are getting 20 grams of protein with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there's 60 grams right there. If we're trying to hit something like an 80-gram protein daily, for example, if you add nuts and seeds as a snack option, nut butter, if you have cottage cheese in your diet or something like that, that is all going to be a way to get little bits of protein throughout the day too. And then we can really kind of easily hit that 80-gram. Again, we do the best we can with this, but the more we can focus on protein, first, you'll feel better. We usually feel better when we're eating more protein, but also we will see more menstrual cycle regularity, which is so important for conception, and then a healthy hormone production too. We try our best to go organic for the Dirty Dozen. So this is a list developed by the Environmental Working Group. This is a database that goes through the top 12 pesticide sprayed foods every year. Reducing pesticide exposure does have benefits for fertility. I usually recommend the Dirty Dozen organic. These are going to be your top 12 pesticide sprayed foods. If you want to eat organic for everything, awesome. Go for it. It can be more expensive. So budget-wise, Dirty Dozen would be my main focus. That is going to drastically reduce the burden of pesticides that can ultimately affect fertility. A lot of things that we just talked about, so leafy greens that I just mentioned, all of these antioxidant berries, they're all on this Dirty Dozen list. So I do highly recommend click that link. We'll send you this presentation, by the way, at the end of the chat, but you could pop that link into Google and it will pop up for you, and then you can see what that full Dirty Dozen list is. And then that way you can follow that moving forward. Lifestyle foundations for fertility are super important too. We want to focus on movement or exercise, sleep, and stress reduction. These are all things, again, that help to support fertility outcomes. General movement recommendations are about 150 minutes of cardiovascular exercise per week, okay? And what that looks like, about 30 minutes, 5 days a week is what we're looking at. If you wanted to do more of like an hour session and a shorter amount of days. For the cardiovascular system, that's where we have benefit with exercise, and then movement helps to support fertility outcomes. If you can add in 2 to 3 strength sessions a week, that helps to support your overall muscle development. That can help to support the musculature within your pelvic floor, which can make delivery a little bit easier. And with things like that, when we exercise, we do see better hormone regulation. If we over-exercise, we're moving our bodies a lot and we're not fueling appropriately, that can be a reason to actually change the menstrual cycle and lose it. So these are not recommendations that like more is always better for movement. But if you're moving more than this, as long as you're fueling properly and you have a regular menstrual cycle, then your body is adapting to those good stressors. If we're moving a lot and we're not fueling properly, then we can sometimes get into a position where that will significantly affect our hormone production, which is not beneficial for fertility outcomes. So there's a balance with this. Sleep-wise, we want to aim for about 7 to 9 hours of restorative sleep, okay? This helps to support fertility outcomes. This is when a lot of our hormones are kind of being built, right? And our immune system function is working. To get restful, restorative sleep, we really want to think about taking screens out of the room, reducing overhead light exposure and screens about an hour at least before you go to sleep. The most beneficial would be reducing screen time and overhead light exposure once the sun has set. Once the sun has set, we should be winding down for the day and kind of reducing our cortisol. And we know that with screen exposure, with overhead light exposure, that can increase cortisol, our stress hormone, which can then inhibit your ability to fall and stay asleep. So with things like this, those are kind of things that we can control within lifestyle the best we can. Of course, we're all sitting on screens right now, right, in the evening. But the best that we can, if you are on screens, wearing blue light blocking glasses can really help to reduce that exposure of light, which then helps to promote sleep. Okay. And sleep, again, is just so important for those fertility outcomes. Stress reduction also can significantly help. Okay. The kind of idea with this is that when we're under significant stress, if we're running away from a bear, who cares about making the hormones that are necessary for conceiving, right? Estrogen, progesterone, and who cares about ovulation, right? We're in that like fight or flight running away from the bear. The more that we can reduce that overall stress, the more that we will have proper hormone production for estrogen and progesterone, which are very important hormones for governing that menstrual cycle that increases likelihood of conception. Okay. Things that help with stress reduction, I'm sure a lot of you already practice things like this, but yoga, meditation, deep belly breathing, journaling, working with a psychologist or counselor can be very, very helpful at reducing the stress. And when we're in kind of preconception time, this can sometimes be a fairly stressful time for people because you want to conceive, right? And so a lot of energy can go into thinking about all of these things, and sometimes that increases stress. So if you find that when you're in this stage of life, or if you're in this stage of life right now, and you're ruminating on a lot of this stuff, and there is that kind of high stress, important to recognize that. Adding in some of these techniques might help to reduce that. But if you're finding that it's really hard to shut the mind off, it can be really helpful to work with counselor or psychologist, or just take a second and breathe, right? And it's okay. All of these are guidelines to follow, right? And will help to support fertility, but it's okay. Like, give yourself some grace here that if like one thing falls off, it's okay. We try again the next day, right? And we kind of get back on track. So I think that's just really important to have kind of awareness around it. And if you are noticing that there's a lot of rumination or stress that's feeding into this process, reach out to someone, right? Or use some of these techniques to kind of just help to reset that stress system. Okay, some supplements and some testing to consider at this time. I do recommend that you speak with your healthcare provider about the best option for you. But in terms of kind of the core supplements that we'll look to start 3 months before trying to conceive, if possible, it is recommended to start a prenatal multivitamin. Prenatal multivitamins, when started a little bit earlier than conceiving, helps to increase the nutrient status that is so important for that egg quality, which can increase your likelihood of conceiving when you want to. It can help to resolve any nutrient deficiency like low iron or low B12 or low vitamin D before conception. Okay. And then also, if you haven't started a prenatal and you are actively trying to conceive right now, that's okay. You can still actively try to conceive, but I just recommend that you talk to your provider about starting a prenatal now. Fish oils with DHEA support egg quality, hormone balance, but are also really important for after conception, can help with baby growing. So we keep women on a prenatal and fish oil through pregnancy as well. A lot of us are deficient in vitamin D, especially here in Canada, especially at this time of year if you haven't been supplementing with vitamin D. With this, in the winter months, so in about October is when we stop making any vitamin D from the sun. Through the winter months, we really don't make any. And we are right around the corner, kind of in May, mid-May is when we start making vitamin D from the sun if we're able to spend time outside. Okay, so a lot of us are deficient in vitamin D. I'm sure a lot of you already supplement with vitamin D. It's a very common supplement that women are on, or everyone in general. I shouldn't just say women. Men, a lot of men are on vitamin D too, because it is such an essential nutrient that we unfortunately don't make in the winter. It's also a really important nutrient for fertility. Okay, and so it's something that we might look at in lab testing as a reason that there could be infertility or we're not getting pregnant when we want to. Sometimes vitamin D deficiency can be a factor. I will have most women on their prenatal. There's a small amount of vitamin D. Most prenatals have about 400 IUs. And then I'll have women on supplemental vitamin D so that we're getting around that 2,000 IUs a day for vitamin D. And that, again, is something we continue in pregnancy. There are also a number of antioxidant nutrients that can really help to support egg quality. I do recommend you speak with your practitioner to understand if these are the right things for you, but we'll consider things like NAC or N-acetylcysteine, inositol, CoQ10. These are all nutrients that help to support antioxidant status, which can help to support egg quality, which then helps to support with conception. Okay, because essentially if we're looking to ovulate an egg and we're working on having the best egg possible, essentially. So when that egg is released, that egg has a higher likelihood of getting fertilized by the sperm, right? And then also when there's great egg quality, you get great corpus luteum production as well. So corpus luteum is essentially the capsule that's around the egg that once you ovulate, it's the capsule that then produces your progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone that is very important for the lining development in the uterus, which ultimately, when the egg is fertilized, the lining is where the egg implants and then starts to grow. Okay. And so if that lining development is being affected by low progesterone, for example, supporting egg quality helps to support that corpus luteum that then helps to support the lining. And so with egg quality or antioxidant supports, you also will get this from your diet with those 3 different colors of veg, with the dark berries in the diet every day, right? But this can really help to support that overall egg quality, corpus luteum production, which then helps with the lining too. Okay. Some of the testing that we'll look into in the preconception phase, I generally will look at nutrient status, iron, B12, vitamin D being the most important to look at. Iron is really needed for pregnancy. And so if you're iron deficient, again, sometimes that can affect the way the lining is being developed, but also you're more likely to experience anemia in pregnancy. And if we can correct that iron deficiency before you conceive, that can be beneficial to reduce the anemia symptoms, which women will feel very tired. You have trouble oxygenating. And so exercise tolerance can sometimes change there. B12 is a super important nutrient for fertility. And so we'll usually check B12 status. Our B12 primarily comes from meat sources. So if you're a vegetarian, I would recommend testing your B12 right away just to know what your baseline is. And if you need to supplement with B12, you should. B12 is found within that prenatal multivitamin as well. And so often, like if women are in kind of this phase of life where conception is maybe not happening right now, but soon, if there's an iron or B12 deficiency, I'll often put women on a prenatal right away so that we correct that. And then we're also on all the nutrients that are going to support the ability to conceive when that time comes. Okay. I will often look at hormones. The hormones that I test around fertility are estradiol or estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. These are the 3 hormones that are secreted from the ovaries. These hormones are really important for the regulation of the menstrual cycle. Okay. And really important for essentially egg development, more so your estrogen is really important for that. And then progesterone, really important for that lining development in the uterus so that there's somewhere for that egg to implant. Testosterone is a hormone that we'll assess for if it's elevated and there is a history of irregular menstrual cycles. We might think about things like PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. That can affect fertility. And so then you want to go target that to support fertility outcomes long term. We'll look at LH, FSH as well. LH and FSH ratios should be tested on day 3 of your menstrual cycle. We want to see that LH and FSH come back in what's called a 1-to-1 ratio. That if your LH is at 5.4, your FSH is at a 5. Okay, so they are the same number. If your LH on day 3 is much higher than your FSH in a 2-to-1 ratio, like a 6-to-3 or a 3-to-1 ratio, 9-to-3, something like that, that is suspicious of PCOS and should be investigated further. If we see that LH and FSH are well regulated, then that indicates that, okay, those hormones which are coming from the brain and signaling to the ovaries for release of estrogen and progesterone through the menstrual cycle are functioning appropriately. Okay, it's a good thing to understand before conceiving. And if there are any imbalances, then we look to correct those. We also assess the thyroid. The thyroid is our main metabolism hormone. With it being the main metabolism and kind of energy hormone, it is very influential on the menstrual cycle. And so if there's a lower thyroid function, sometimes that can inhibit the hormone regulation in the menstrual cycle. And that can be a reason for having difficulty conceiving. Cortisol is our main stress hormone. I will usually assess this to understand, is there potentially higher stress that could lead to difficulty with trying to conceive? So usually, again, we'll test these things to understand baseline, what is hormone output, and then we adjust or target areas that might need support. Really important to look at blood sugar regulation. Blood sugar regulation can affect overall how we ovulate. This is a key thing in PCOS as well, where oftentimes we'll see pictures of insulin resistance that can then affect the regularity of the menstrual cycle. With this, I will generally assess to see how blood sugar regulation is looking for my patients so that we can understand, is there anything that needs to be supported there? The diet we talked about on the first slide helps to support blood sugar regulation too. There's lots of fiber in that diet, right? If we're getting 3 colors of veg with lunch and dinner, and then good protein sources, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. When we eat in that way for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we are supporting our blood sugar regulation throughout the entire day. One thing with that I should have mentioned in that first slide is I recommend you always eat breakfast, especially if you're in this kind of preconception phase. Breakfast is so important for proper blood sugar regulation throughout the day, but it's also very important for overall stress hormone output throughout the day. And if we're not getting breakfast, then we kind of send our bodies on this little blood sugar roller coaster throughout the day. And sometimes we'll see a spike in cortisol that we don't necessarily want, especially if you're having caffeine on an empty stomach. So 20 grams of protein with your breakfast, ideally before 10 a.m. at the latest, best case within 1 to 2 hours of waking. In some cases, if there are gut symptoms, like you experience a lot of indigestion, bloating, changes in bowel movements, constipation, diarrhea, that would be a reason to potentially support overall gut health and the gut microbiome. The gut microbiome and overall gut health, so important for our ability to absorb nutrients, right? To get all those good antioxidants and proteins that we need to build our hormones properly, but also so important for elimination. elimination of all of our hormones. And we don't necessarily want buildup of hormones. We want to be able to produce them and then detoxify them appropriately. So if there are symptoms like that, we'll often look there. If there's been known heavy metal exposures, that can sometimes affect fertility. People that are exposed to a lot of oil and gas byproducts, paint fumes, things like that, we might think about toxin exposures. So these are things we would gather in a health history to figure out if that testing is indicated. And then sometimes we'll look at methylation panels. Methylation essentially is the way that we utilize our B vitamins to move through detoxification pathways of our hormones, heavily involved there, also heavily involved in inflammatory pathways. And so if there's any concern with inflammation in the body that might be affecting fertility, we'll sometimes consider looking at a methylation panel to understand genetically, do you have the key genes to be able to take the nutrients from your diet and make the methylated forms of B12, B6 in order to move through inflammation processes that ultimately lead to a reduction in inflammation? Do you have the proper genes to be able to detoxify your hormones appropriately? So these are all things for us to kind of figure out in the preconception phase, and then things that we can work on supporting depending on what comes up on testing. The core supplements, these are kind of foundational. Again, the egg quality, talk to your provider if those are indicated for you. But the vitamin D, prenatal fish oil, these are kind of the base and what you would continue in pregnancy. Okay, let's move on to this next slide here. So looking at pregnancy through trimester, of course, there's 3 different trimesters. In the chat, I sent you guys a link to the Linus Pauling Institute diet infographic. I love this infographic. I send this to a lot of my patients. I think it's really, really great in terms of just walking you through all of the different nutrients that you should be looking at to have on your plate. It's really well laid out, and it also kind of takes you through at the bottom what the dietary recommendations are for first trimester, second trimester, and third trimester in terms of calories. If you can, in your first trimester, if you can follow the fertility diet and you don't feel super nauseous or have really bad food aversions, sweet, that's great. If you do have food aversions and morning sickness, listen to your body. Try to eat if you can, get some calories in, but it can be really intense, the morning sickness and food aversions. So do the best you can, right? You are on a prenatal, you are getting a lot of those nutrients through that prenatal, but the more that we can kind of incorporate those foods in, the better. I find for a lot of women in the first trimester, there are a lot of those food aversions. And so we're just trying to get some nutrients in. Smoothies for a lot of people can be tolerated. Again, this is not for everybody. Some people will have food aversions to smoothies, but smoothies can be really supportive, especially if you're feeling nauseous because of low blood sugar. So sometimes what happens in the first trimester is that if we don't eat more regularly, then we'll see that nauseousness comes in, and that can be because of just little fluctuations in your blood sugar, which are just more pronounced when the hormones are surging, right? And usually this is because of the really high progesterone. So with this, if you can sip a smoothie, that can last longer, right, than eating one meal in a sitting. And sometimes that can be really, really helpful for just helping to reduce that morning sickness. And smoothies can pack a punch. So you can put in like a 20-gram protein powder. You can add some kind of mixed green, kale, spinach in there, some dark berries, right? And then maybe oat milk or a nut butter. And that's a pretty well-rounded meal, right? Like that we would consider to be that well-rounded meal that we talked about on that first page, but hopefully tolerated enough through that kind of morning sickness time. And then for most women, that morning sickness and the food aversions will start to ease in the second trimester. So about 14 weeks is usually where we see the symptoms really start to ease. Energy levels tend to come back online a bit. First trimester is pretty energy zapping. And so again, we do the best we can through that first trimester. And then once energy has returned a bit, and if there is less of that food aversion and morning sickness, and you do have the ability to eat more variety, move back to that fertility diet as best you can. Okay. In the second trimester, this is where we start increasing calorie intake. You do need to add about 200 calories more in the second trimester. And then by the time you're in third trimester, it's actually 300 extra calories daily from your baseline. Okay. And so we generally will look to add this in, whether it's well-rounded snacks throughout the day so that you're eating just a bit more often, which can help with energy levels throughout the day. In pregnancy, that can sometimes be an option. Sometimes it's just increasing a little bit how much you're eating with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All women are different. Some women will still experience some of that morning sickness if they don't eat regularly. And so in those cases, we might just have kind of normal meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, but then have snacks as your increase in calorie intake. For others, we just increase if there aren't any of those food aversions or that morning sickness that's kind of popping through. With this, in first trimester, if you can move your body and exercise, fantastic. If your energy levels are very, very low, listen to your body. They will come back, and then movement can come back in. For some women that I've worked with, like getting around the block can be challenging in the first trimester. So this is just a time that we really want to listen to our bodies. Lean on your partner for support if you can. And then in the second trimester, getting back into your regular exercise routine. In pregnancy, it is not recommended to add in exercise that you've never done before. So if you've never done HIIT workouts, for example, this is maybe not the best time to try those out. We want to do movement that we're familiar with. Okay. And so if you're used to yoga and Pilates practices, or you really like running or mountain biking, those are things, if your body is used to and adapted to that form of exercise, you go to your energy tolerance now. It may have shifted a bit in pregnancy. For some people, it doesn't shift. And we're all so different in terms of what we experience through this. But just really important to listen to your body and then continue with the prenatal, the vitamin D and DHEA. You will see your doctor regularly through pregnancy. You'll get the necessary testing done. So they will look at iron and blood sugar regulation, and then ultrasounds throughout to make sure that babe is healthy and growing properly. And those are what we track through pregnancy. And then we also look at, okay, if there are really intense morning sickness symptoms, for example, you're vomiting, and if there's any kind of weight loss, that's where we may consider either speaking to your doctor about the medication, which helps to reduce that morning sickness, or sometimes we'll think about some things that we might be able to incorporate into the diet, like ginger tea. A cup a day can sometimes really, really help to soothe that nausea for women. And it's all very patient dependent, but we try to and just make sure that these symptoms are being supported through pregnancy. Okay, at 36 weeks, this is where we consider some things to help support preparing your body for labor. Sorry, I say at 36 weeks, but pelvic floor physio, you can definitely look into sooner. And if you know that you have pelvic floor weakness or a really tight pelvic floor, really great to see a pelvic floor physiotherapist or work with an osteopath to help support either releasing the tight muscles that need to be released in prep for labor, or considering some support in terms of strengthening some of the muscles if there is weakness there. So these are things to consider. Pelvic floor physiotherapists are wonderful resources, and same with osteopaths who have experience with working with pregnancy. Generally, in the third trimester is where we might be experiencing a little bit of discomfort as babe is growing, right? And there might be more pressure on that pelvic floor. So women will generally seek treatment a little bit more in that third trimester, but it can be really helpful to see your practitioner once you're into second trimester so that they can assess and see if there are any imbalances in the pelvic floor. And then that way you can work on strengthening what needs to be strengthened, loosening what needs to be loosened in prep for delivery. The reason for this is that it helps to reduce tearing and hopefully makes that labor process just a bit smoother. At 36 weeks, we can consider adding in some uterine tonics. This is something you have to discuss with your healthcare provider. There are things like red raspberry leaf tea that we can incorporate into the diet that helps to support the uterus and help to support a smoother labor. There is really good research on this. It is not something you ever start before 36 weeks because we are not trying to prepare the uterus for labor before 36 weeks, right? Like we want to just hold everything in there. We want to hold babe in there. We want to hold placenta, and we just want everything to grow. These are only things you would ever start 4 weeks out from that 40-week due date. Okay. Again, you want to work with your healthcare team, make sure that this is the right thing for you. But these are things that we can consider in the 36 plus weeks to start to get the body prepped for labor and delivery. Another thing to consider, I often recommend that women start thinking about this in the third trimester, is things to support nourishing the milk supply. So these are things that you can easily add into diet, okay? We call these galactagogue-rich foods. Essentially what that means is helping to support milk supply, okay? Whole grains and legumes, oats, barley, peas, are all really helpful to support milk supply. And so adding these into your breakfast or adding them into soups and having those kind of prepared for when you deliver and once you're home from hospital, these are things that you can incorporate in your diet through that breastfeeding journey that can help with supporting that milk supply. Nuts and seeds are other ones. So walnuts, almonds, sunflower, sesame, flax, pumpkin seeds, they all help to support milk supply and they have good research on them. And then there are a few culinary herbs that I've listed here. So dill, fennel, fenugreek, ginger, cinnamon, and garlic. If you don't like some of these, you don't have to incorporate them. Find some that you do. And if you can incorporate those in your food, like have some of these like dill on cooked salmon, for example, or ginger you could have in a tea, garlic add into a stir fry. These can all help in terms of supporting, again, that milk production, which will help to support breastfeeding little one and help to support their ability to gain weight, essentially, and give them all the nutrients that they need. There is traditional medicinals mother's milk tea. That's a herbal formula that can help to support milk supply. That's something you can start after birth. That's usually, again, something I recommend talking to your practitioner about. Make sure that you're the right candidate for something like that. But all of these dietary things, as long as you tolerate them well when you eat them, are super reasonable to add in. Chicken soup can be really great because you can add kind of all of these like barley and peas and legumes into chicken soup and then have it with a bone broth. And that can be really easy to digest in those early weeks and help with the nutrient status to help support nourishing that milk supply. Breastfeeding and the nutrition demands of breastfeeding are even more than in pregnancy. Okay, you need an extra 500 calories daily to support breastfeeding, and you need to drink about 2.7 liters of water, up from standard 2 liters of water that's recommended for most women. You will be thirsty when you breastfeed, and so lots of women just instinctively drink more because they're more thirsty. The calories can really help to sustain milk production, and it's a very energetically demanding process. So having snacks available, and you can think about things like lactation cookies or energy balls that have some of those oats and the nuts and seeds that all help to support breast milk and milk production. If you make those, if you're able to, in the kind of month before, or if you make them even before that and freeze them, then you have them on hand when you're hungry. That can just help to support breastfeeding overall. So I generally will recommend, if you're able to at some point in the 3rd trimester, to support that, and kind of have those things ready for when you come home with babe. The initial parts of having babe home are very busy. So if we can have these things kind of pre-prepped, then that can be really, really helpful. One thing, I apologize that I didn't add this in my presentation, but I've just thought of it now. In the 3rd trimester in pregnancy, we will sometimes consider also adding in a probiotic. A probiotic taken daily can reduce the risk of preterm labor. And so that's something I'll generally add in that 3rd trimester. It's not indicated before that. Not that it's harmful to be on a probiotic before that. It's just that the research shows that in 3rd trimester is really where we see benefit from being on a probiotic. Again, something to talk to your practitioner about in terms of adding in. We'll just talk about this quickly in terms of the 6 weeks to 3 months postpartum. I generally recommend looking at some testing. This can help us understand if there are any nutrient deficiencies, any irregularities with thyroid or blood sugar regulation postpartum. It's very common to see deficiencies after delivery in iron. Iron's probably the most common thing that we see that needs support. Generally, while women are breastfeeding, I keep them on a prenatal multivitamin because it's helping to support that nutrient status. And because so many of us will get deficient in these key nutrients postpartum, if we can top those stores up or keep them stable while you're breastfeeding, and then once you finish breastfeeding, if you want to conceive again, like if you want to have another baby, if we support those nutrient deficiencies now, you are less likely to have significant nutrient deficiencies in 2nd or 3rd pregnancy, for example. Usually we will see that there are more significant nutrient deficiencies in the 2nd or 3rd pregnancy if we haven't been supporting those deficiencies. And so generally I'll recommend that we look at some testing. You can talk to your healthcare practitioner about this to understand if there's any deficiency that's worth supporting. If there's any irregularity in the thyroid, it will be tested through your pregnancy, which is great, but it's often not tested postpartum. And sometimes there are deficiencies there that can significantly affect our energy levels, our mood regulation, or fertility for conceiving again. And so it's something that we'll think about, again, testing to see where baseline is postpartum. Anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months, depending on how you recover after delivery, is what I recommend for testing there. And then that way, again, we're just getting a new baseline of where things are at postpartum, and then we can make sure that we're supporting those areas moving forward. Okay. Thank you guys so much for listening. Any questions? I'm going to have to hit stop sharing on this presentation so that I can open up the Google Meets again and see. Yes. For folks using a midwife, the postnatal testing can still be requested. For sure. Yeah. And generally you will see your midwife. Well, generally they'll do a home visit pretty quickly after babe is born. And then usually there is a postpartum care visit that's offered. And so generally you can get that testing done through the midwife. And if not, if you do have a primary care provider, then that's something you could talk to them about too. What do you recommend protein sources for a vegetarian? Great question. With this, I mean, there's lots of different vegetarian sources. Essentially, we want to look for complex proteins, right? One of the things with vegetarian diets is that we have to pair things together to make sure that you get all of the amino acids necessary. So if you can eat brown rice and legumes or beans, so chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans, when you pair those with the rice, that gives you that complex protein. And so that's a great source if you enjoy soy-based products like tofu or tempeh, as long as they come from an organic, non-GMO source, those are great options for protein. Vegetarian or vegan protein powder options, as long as you don't experience bloating from them. A lot of people do, so double check that. But that's a great option and usually will give you 20 grams in a scoop. If you have dairy in your diet, a Greek yogurt has a great source or amount of protein in there. Cottage cheese is another great one. So those are good options there as well. And those are great ways. Nuts and seeds are a great way to get your protein intake too. So it's kind of with a vegetarian diet, you can use the palm of your hand, right? We just want the palm of our hand in terms of like having that much chickpeas, and then you would have some brown rice with that kind of thing. You can also track that through something like Chronometer. I'll just write that down. Chronometer or MyFitnessPal. Those can help you just understand in terms of protein sources and then your protein goal of that 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight, if you're hitting that recommendation by what you're doing currently. And so you just add the amounts that you're putting in, and you don't need to track forever, but it can just give you a good understanding of, okay, when I ate like that throughout the day, what was my protein intake, right? And did I have enough? Eggs are another great option for protein sources for vegetarians if you have eggs in your diet too. Can someone be on a prenatal long-term like a multivitamin? Definitely. A lot of women are on prenatals long-term. The only thing to check is if you have high iron, you don't need iron from a prenatal, and having too much iron can actually be inflammatory in the body. And so that's the thing I would double check is just what is your iron status? You can find prenatals without iron, but you might as well just be on a good general multivitamin, like a women's multi or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily need a prenatal, but if your iron is on the lower end of normal or deficient, then a prenatal multivitamin long-term, super beneficial. And a lot of women feel better on a prenatal if they have low iron, because again, we're kind of hitting like all of the nutrients, right? But then also you're getting that good amount of iron. And generally the iron in a prenatal, than just taking straight iron on its own, usually stomach-wise is a little bit better tolerated. Again, very patient dependent. If you struggle with your current prenatal, might be worth trying something different or thinking about more highly absorbable forms of nutrients, and that can sometimes be beneficial. But yeah, just double check that you don't have high iron, and then otherwise a prenatal is quite safe to be on long term.
Also, I just must say, what an amazing presentation. It was so informative, and oh my goodness, I learned so much.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, thank you guys all so much for being here. If you ever want to connect, you know where to find me. I'm at Nirvana Naturopathic Medicine, and that info will be sent to you. I would recommend just grabbing that little infographic if you can before this chat goes away. If you can just click on that, I find that really, really helpful. I send that to a lot of my patients, and just a really great resource to have on hand. But I hope you guys learned something. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening and a good spring into summer here finally.
Yeah. And if ever anybody is interested in working with Dr. Smith, she is accepting patients at this time, and she's absolutely a dream to work with. I'm one of her patients as well. And we do offer complimentary discovery calls at Nirvana Health, which you can book through that link I shared. I will have everything in a nice recap coming your way in a couple of days, including the link to this webinar recording. And I'll also include all the infographics and everything else discussed.
Cool. Well, I'm going to sign off here. Have a great rest of your evening, guys. And Melissa will be in touch soon. Yeah, and happy summer.